Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining. Let's see. Let's get right to the questions. I don't have any planned talk. I've got some things I'll probably bring up later in the chat as I get a little bit farther along. But I feel lately I've wasted too much of people's time talking about stuff on my mind, and people are here to ask me questions about what's on theirs. So let me get right to it. And hello to everybody. And if I miss you as you come in, I appreciate you being here. Do I need to put my reverb tank in a bag? Opinion seems to be divided. Would love to hear my take on this. Let me scoot over here so I'm not hiding behind the text. Do you need? No, it's not necessary. It can be beneficial. The benefits it offers, or it can give some protection against dust and potentially oxidization to the RCA connectors, help keep those clean. It does add some dampening. You can also use the little rubber grommets that sit between the reverb tank and whatever it's screwed to, whether that is a piece of heavy-duty cardboard or wood that's then slid in the bag, or in some amps just to the inside of the chassis. Those little insulating grommets help an awful lot, as can foam dampening on the tank, if just keep it from being too sensitive to vibrations. And the bag does contribute to that. It increases the mass and is a dampening material. And sometimes that's all you need. But it is just fine to have, just one second, I don't want to insert ads, go away. It is just fine to use without one. I think it is better to have one. Hey Andre, what fixed resistor value would I put on a 77 Super Reverb 45 watt together with a 10K trim pot for bias adjustment mod? The plate voltage is 440 volts. I don't recall off the top of my head. I usually use between 4.7K and 15K for that purpose. Sometimes I go as high as a 22K. Depends on what the bias voltage present is and what the range of adjustment you need it to be at is. So say that odds are you're going to be finding that somewhere between negative 38, negative 42 volts is where you want to be most of the time. Well, if that's kind of towards the middle of the trim pot, you're great. If it's at one extreme of the trim pot, you can increase or decrease that resistor until the range that you want to be in is more in the middle of the trim pot. So typically the resistor that we're replacing is a 27K. And so a 10K and a 17K would give you the range of the original. But usually those things are biased pretty cold, so it's not uncommon to do a 15K. But sometimes you want to go even smaller. But you want to make sure it cannot go to zero, so there has to be some resistance there. So I would say typically 4.7 to 15K is the range that you want. Your mileage will vary depending on the amp and the year, but it's not a big deal to do. Hello, everyone. Rob French, thanks very much. Yeah, sorry it was relatively a short video. I've just been crazy busy, and in addition to the amp work and the family stuff, Nikki asked very nicely if I could do something about the old security door. She's sick of looking at the old security door in the house. It's one of those really ugly black iron ones installed everywhere in about 1982. And so that is going away, but in order for that to go away, I've got to strip and sand the old paint and fill some holes and prime it and get it ready for a new security door, so it doesn't look like it's a rental property, doing it right. Norm Abrams on a budget is my motto. Hey Andre, last week you asked about the 270 microfarad. Yeah, okay. Yeah, inrush current limiter is useless. It's not really useless, but it's not really necessary. The valve rectifier, the tube rectifier, provides a certain amount of that itself. the inrush current limiter is one more thing to go wrong, one more thing to fail. They don't always, but I see them fail a lot. But the other thing is it has no correspondence, no correlation between whether or not you have inrush current limiting and the maximum rated capacitance of a rectifier tube. So on a 5U4 GB or a GZ34, you don't want to have 135 microfarad for that first stage. You want to have no more than about 64. And so a dual hundreds will give you 50 and everything will be great. And you probably won't hear any difference between 125 and 50 for that first stage. But you will hear a difference between, hey, this thing doesn't work. Why not? Okay, the rectifier tube's not turning on because it died. Which power tubes would I recommend, what I said, suggest for a 45 watt, 77 super reverb with push pull master volume for clean and loud tones? You're very welcome for my channel. Thank you for being here, Andre. I would get the tongue saw 6L6 GC STR, which is very similar to the RCA short plate 6L6s that would have been used in, say, a 65 or 66 super reverb. They're relatively inexpensive. They're easily available. They sound good. They're not as prone to microphonics as the longer 6L6, which is a big factor in a combo. And you can get them at almost every reputable tube store. Again, buy from a tube vendor, someone who that's their job. Don't buy from eBay, or unless you really know what you're doing. Don't buy from Guitar Center or Z-Sounds or anything. Go to the tube store. Go to Tube Depot. Go to Magic Tubes, Euro Tubes. A place, that's what they do. They know what's working. They know what's not working. They stand behind their product. They actually do testing, and they actually match the tubes. They don't rely on what the factory says the matching is, because the factory matching is kind of a wish and a prayer, and at the smallest possible voltages. So I never take factory matching too seriously. I'm not sure what the question. Okay, all right. Two-part. 1 of 4. Future weekend project idea. GFRR sends a good man's brother. I don't know what GFRR is. Seems to pan a single guitar part hard left then right, then back to center mid phrase. If one wanted to do that live, could an ABY pedal feeding 2 amp inputs be used? Well, John, here's the issue with that. Now I'm going down to part 3 of 4. Could be replaced with a blend pot, and I don't know what the contra code is, and don't blow on the pins of your Soldano preamp. Your breath has moisture in it. You cannot avoid that. Get a little air blower sold for cameras. They're like $5 all over Amazon. It's just a little bulb, and use that for cleaning, things like that. But the larger question of panning live, most people are playing with someone else's PA. You're not touring with your own PA. You don't have your own sound guy. You don't have your own crew. And so you're just using whatever the PA is, and typically that's going to be mono, because running a PA stereo is very problematic in most acoustic environments. It can sound great in the mix position wherever that guy is, but over by the bar, it's going to sound crazy, and somewhere else in the room, it's going to sound awful. So most PAs are done mono for very good reasons. And so all that stereo information and panning is useless. You might hear it on stage if it's happening on the amps, but depending on the size of the venue, it may not be heard at all. And most people should just run mono, because in addition to that, there are other phase issues with stereo effects. By the time you get to the point where you're going to do stuff like that, and necessary to, and someone's going to hear it, you have to be touring at the level where you carry your own sounds, entire PA, all your sound system, all your monitors. You have your own front of house mix engineer, your own monitor or in-ear mix engineer. It's a total different scale to pull off stereo. And it's still not always a very good idea in most large venues. A lot of times they'll say, well, we're going to run the bulk in mono, and we'll do some stuff in stereo that's kind of icing. Then if it disappears in some parts of the arena, it doesn't really matter that much. Don't worry about what's on the record. You can listen to Hendrix, Are You Experienced in Electric Ladyland in headphones all you want. It's really difficult to do that live in any kind of reliable way. So I would avoid that thing. Just focus on everything else you can control. But if you're in the studio and want to play around with that, just ask the mixer to do that panning, and the mixer can automate that panning, or very easily done in the mix. Hey, Bill. I'm glad that worked out, buddy. Got some 10-inch creambacks in his old Music Man. And you like it. I'm glad that you like it. I like those creambacks. They're nice. Mom is doing well, thanks, Steve. She's doing much better. We've got some doctor's office visits this week that might be getting to the point where things are going to get really better. Like we will know to expect it to get better because X, Y, and Z, for reasons I don't want to get into here. But we've been battling with a lot of uncertainty, and getting this doctor to communicate with this other doctor has been a nightmare sometimes. And it's not just two, it's about 6 different medical practices we're trying to get to actually share information with each other. Hey, Green Mystic Surfer, having an issue with this BE100 Deluxe where the sound cuts out and comes back intermittently on the clean channel. Do I think this could be an issue with tubes? I think it's most likely an issue with tubes, because the BE100 is really well built. That said, it does not have to be just a tube issue. It could be a solder joint, something vibrated the wrong way in transit. Maybe the amp was dropped. Maybe the amp wasn't dropped by you. Maybe no one even told you that they dropped your amp. Really well-built amps, there's no such thing as foolproof. But for an intermittent issue, I would certainly try a different tube before I took it to a tech. But any tech you took it to would be able to go in there just with a chopstick and move wires around and say, oh yeah, this solder joint, for whatever reason, needs to be reflowed. Dirty pots can affect it as well. Make sure you've got clean pots. That's a good point, Ted. But the tube is the first thing that someone can do without opening the thing up. Whatever is causing that is going to be something minor and easily remedied. So, no one makes anything that's perfect, but you can make things that can be serviced very easily and quickly. It's like, in our minds, when an amp comes in, we're all like F1 mechanics in the pit, and we've got, set the clock, and we've got to do all this. But, fortunately, we don't have all those pressures. But my point was, it's not that F1 cars never need work. They need work constantly, but they're designed to be serviced, and they get right back out on the road. I lost control of that analogy, but anyway, the BE100 is ready for doing some more laps after a little bit of normal care and feeding. There are days when I do this and everything just goes smoothly and I feel like I'm in it. And there are days when I feel like I'm just talking to a box by myself and it's kind of out of it. And I just feel disconnected right now. Maybe I'll settle into it as I go. Let's see, where are we? Hey, Matt Johnson, on amps like the DR103 and some super leads, the PT secondary, the power transformer secondary, has 2 bias leads, one for the bias feeds, one to ground. Where do I think the best place to connect that ground to avoid noise? That's kind of controversial. Best way to put this. The bias is one of the noisier grounds in the amp. So in general, especially in a traditional way like a high watt DR103 or a super lead, you would want to have the noisiest grounds as far from the input as possible, and then all connections to chassis ground being made closer and closer to the input as they get quieter. So, and you can see this in some of the Marshall grounding videos I've done and the high watts I've done. The HT center tap and reservoir ground should be as far from the input jack as possible. Just move it out of the way, keep it over there by the power transformer. And the AC safety ground, which can have some hash on it, should also be in that part of the chassis, separate from everything else, but far from the input jack. And then the screen and the phase inverter are often tied together because they're all within the negative feedback loop. And you can either tie that all with the preamp stuff in a galactic ground kind of thing where it just goes to the input jack main ground connection, or you can do sequential connections. So I say here's screen, then here's phase inverter, here's preamp, and here's input. With that, whichever way you do it, say if here's all the preamp stuff and here's the HT secondary and reservoir grounds here, your bias needs to be here, so in between the two. So HT and reservoir are noisiest, then the bias, then everything else. And if you think of it just like, well, the screen node is not as filtered as the preamp node, so the screen ground can have a little more noise on it. So screen, and then phase inverter, then preamp, then preamp. That's the way to think about it. But you can join them all together as long as you're still using that approach in terms of how the cathodes are going to the filter nodes and then all tied together in specific ways. But the bias in that case could be the first thing, which then goes to the screen, which then goes to the PI, et cetera, et cetera. I still feel disconnected, like I'm underwater. Maybe my ears are clogged up and I don't realize it, but I have that feeling like when you're driving and you go down a hill and all of a sudden your ears go, and you're like, oh, I had no idea for the last 20 miles I wasn't hearing anything. I'm feeling like that. What are the consequences of changing values of caps and power supply? Also, are film caps preferable to electrolytics in the signal path? Usually, film caps are preferable to electrolytics in the signal path. There are those who say you can't hear a difference. I have built pedals using electrolytics and then the same circuit using all film, and invariably, not only did I think the version built with film caps sounded better, but I was able to pick it out in a blind A/B comparison of the same circuit with everything else being like 1% metal film resistors and all, so very equivalent. I have not done that experiment with amplifiers because electrolytics in the values that we use for film caps in these circuits are hard to find. You're not going to find a lot of 10 nanofarad electrolytics rated for 600 volts. Electrolytics tend to be 1 microfarad and higher, and film caps tend to be 2 microfarad and smaller. Just because to make a 10 microfarad cap, a film cap that's 10 microfarad and 500 volts would be like this big, whereas electrolytics this big. Vice versa. A 22 microfarad, 63 volt electrolytic is about this big, and there's no need to build electrolytic versions of much smaller capacitors usually because people are just going to use film or ceramic. As far as the consequence of changing values of caps and power supply, that is way too open-ended and large a subject for this stream today. I'd have to do the rest of the stream just on this. And I think Uncle Doug's already got some pretty good videos up on power supply design. And Merlin Blenko has got literal books on this subject. And I think it's never a bad thing for me to just say, go here. He discusses this in much more detail than I can do in a live chat. And he has all the diagrams and all the math is worked out. So you can hear me try to wing it in a non-structured way for 3 hours, or you can read a book. I think that's the way to go. Hello, JL from Belgium. Bonjour. If you're from the French-speaking part of Belgium, I'm not sure how to say good day in Flemish or Dutch. Sorry. But when I get there, I'll find out. Hey, Ian Hilton just got a 72 Deluxe. The taper on the volume pots is a little extreme. What taper I suggest? J taper. A 1 meg J taper. That's a 25-30% taper. That's what they used in all the 60s Fenders, and that's what that circuit should have. And you can get them from C distribution. Jeff Harper says the first book is out of print, says I had to go to Amazon to get it. Well, go to Amazon and get it. It's not the only book out there. You can also, Merlin really writes clearly for musicians to get into the electronics world, but there's so many books out there on this stuff. Radio Designer's Handbook Volume 4 is free in PDF form. A lot of good stuff. But I can't link them all here. Let's see, kind of low wattage JMP 87 clone with 6v6 to sound similar to the traditional EL34 tone. We'll have it sound. Well, Marcus, that's the question people have been trying to answer. It will have its own characteristics if you want them to be emphasized. It will have similar sounds to the traditional if that's the characteristics you want to emphasize. I think that a lot of people would have a hard time telling, but someone who's played 50 watt 87s with 6550s or EL34s would tell the difference. They say that it feels different. It sounds good. I like it. I could use it, but it does feel different. Those who've never used either are going to think it's awesome. And so the amp designers can do one of two things. They can design like the Friedman Runt series that uses two 6v6s and say, well, yeah, it's not going to be exactly the same as its big brothers, but you won't get kicked out of the club. And it'll be close enough for rock and roll, and a real experienced player can get a good sound out of this, and everyone will understand that. And yeah, it sounds a little bit different. Still sounds cool. Let's play. Or you can do what Marshall does and say, well, we're going to do a really terribly coldly biased 6v6 with no substantial B plus on it. It's not going to sound anything like a real Marshall. It's not even going to sound like a very good version of a 6v6 equipped Marshall circuit. But people won't know because it'll say Marshall on the front, and all the people on the forums who tell me I'm an idiot say, man, this thing is the best thing ever. And they've, like the Origin 20, etc. And it's just embarrassing to watch people type these things. They type them, and I feel so bad for them. And they always say LOL or shake my damn head, or, I find a correlation between intelligence and emoji usage. There's my hot take. Hey, Martin, you're having a mini heat wave in Scotland. What is that? 22 degrees? I wish I were kidding. I know it's getting. I know it's getting pretty warm in Europe. Much warmer than you should be. And I know that Scotland's not Europe, but geographically, you have the weather. Weather doesn't observe boundaries. Hey, Captain Grumpus, the K-Line's doing great. Their tele styles are fantastic. You cannot go wrong. You just got to spec out the one that's right for you. I think they're fantastic instruments. I'm not saying the K-Line's the only maker of similar fantastic instruments, but they are certainly one of the better ones I've tried, and I've tried an awful lot. I think you should check out their tele style. I can't remember what it's called. Sorry. But I'm very, very pleased with it, Springfield. Hey, Christina. In what order should I arrange my guitar pedals? Distortion, overdrive, phaser, delay, octave. Chorus, octave divider, envelope, filter, compressor. Well, in general, you want to do gain and then time-based. So, distortion, overdrive, and compressor are all gain effects. So if you put the compressor first, you won't be able to drive the overdrive pedal as much with your guitar pickups, but you may not need to. If you put the compressor after the distortion and overdrive, any noise of the distortion or overdrive pedal will be ramped up crazy by that compressor. So people who use compressors with that setup typically do the compressor first. I hate compressor pedals for guitar. I'm the wrong person to ask. I would certainly do play around with whichever you like better, distortion, overdrive, that sequence. Those are going to be the first two. If you have a tuner, stick ahead of that. Phaser, delay, chorus, octave divider, envelope filter. Those are getting to time, but octave divider is specifically pitched. So the octave divider probably right after the overdrive and the distortion, so it has a less confused signal to work with. Then, Scotland's in Britain, WS. They insist that the island is separate from the rest of Europe. Anyway, delay, chorus, phaser, chorus and phaser, kind of interchangeable in terms of order. Delay, you might want to have before those two, though. So if you want to apply the chorus effect to all the repeats, or if you just want to repeat. Do you want to have your repeats chorused, or you just want a repeat of what was chorused? Those three are kind of interchangeable. Envelope filter, probably right where the octave divider is. Basically, play around with it. As long as your gain stuff is at front of your time stuff, you can't go too far wrong. Make sure that you don't have... how often do you use overdrive and distortion at the same time? If you're not using them at the same time, it doesn't matter. If you're using it at the same time, one of those positions will be quieter, because remember, the distortion adds a lot more background noise than overdrive. So if you have the overdrive ahead of the distortion, you're going to have a little less noise than if you're running the output of the distortion into the overdrive. Hey, Steve. I'm sure Dave's long-awaited Vox style amp will sound good. I don't know what exactly he's doing or when it's exactly going to be ready, because I just haven't got around to asking him. But I'm sure if you love Friedman and you want one of his clean amps, go for it, or wait for it. Absolutely, you won't regret it. But I don't know if it's going to be a year of or 2 years or 3 years. So ask Dave. WS says, Britain is part of Europe. I'm confusing your political institution with a continent. I'm not confusing anything, WS. I'm saying that the Scots and the English and most Brits are very much in their minds separate from Europe. If you want to be technically correct, northwestern Scotland is actually part of America geographically, because all the stuff above the locks where that horizontal shear is, that all used to be connected to Nova Scotia. That was all part of us, and got carried off across the Atlantic with you guys and collided with you guys at some point. So the Highlands are part of North America, and everything south of the Locks district with all those rifts is originally part of Europe. At least you don't live in Doggerland. So, but I think it's culturally and politically, they're very keen on saying that they don't want to be lumped in with Europe, and I try to respect that. I also try to respect the difference between a Brit and an Irishman. And I don't call the Welsh an Englishman. I don't call the Scots English, and I don't even call the Cornish English. I'm not sure if the English call the Cornish English. If you want to get into the politics of everything, the cultural politics of everything. Have I come to terms with the headstock chip? It's still... Oh, I'm not talking shite, WS. I think it's a silly distinction for you, thing for you to get mad about, just because I didn't lump Scotland in with all of Europe. I don't even lump all of Europe in with all of Europe. I don't think that there's too much culturally similar between Spain and Latvia. Anyway, ridiculous. Have I come to terms with headstock shape? Speaking of shite pronunciations, I don't actually love the headstock, but it does everything it needs to do, and in terms of the angle behind the nut, it's perfect. Aesthetically, it's not my thing, but that individual Springfield I have is just so good and so resonant and voiced so well that I live with the headstock. It's a hell of a lot better than the Silver Sky, so there could be worse. Hey PF, just bought a 65 Deluxe Reverb, all original except for power caps, and all works well. Want to try out some other vintage amps with an aux box? Is that safe with older amps? Thank you. Yeah, sure. Make sure that you have a very good quality cable connecting it. Run it 8 ohms. Make sure that the speaker jack on the amp is tight and clean. Other than that, you'll be fine. Is there a problem to install the bias adjustment trim pot on the unused hole of the ground switch knob 77 Silverface Super Reverb? Thank you. No, it's fine. I'm here for these questions. Sorry, I'm just distracted by the Scotland Europe thing. I have to say this: geologically, northwestern Scotland did not used to be part of Europe. It's part of the landmass that collided and got broken off and drifted across the Atlantic. All that doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah, there is a problem in that the hole is a half-inch hole, and the shaft of the pot is a 3/4 inch pot. It's not 3/4; it's 3/8 inch. So the diameter doesn't fit. So what you can do is you can get the insulated washers from Switchcraft and mount the pot in that hole, which will take care of the fact that then the bushing will fit in the half-inch hole. Would then need to make sure that you deliberately ground the pot casing to maybe wherever, maybe one of the octal sockets cathode ground is. That's what I've done in the past, and that lets you install a bias pot there, and still have it fit physically. The issue is that it's externally adjustable, and you want to make sure that people don't say, "What does this do?" So I'm not a big fan of that because it's on the rear panel, and someone could get in there and with a screwdriver and say, "Does it sound any different this way or this way?" and then blow your tubes up. The old style that's accessible from the bottom, at least the average person or other member of your band is less likely to see it and say, "What does that do?" But it can be done, and so that's the way to do it. Sorry, I've been doing two things at once, and like I said, I'm a little bit disconnected today. But half-inch hole, 3/8 inch bushing on the pot, you need to have that insulated adapter to make it fit, at which point you need to ground the shell of the bias pot. Hopefully that makes sense. Hey, Christina wants to build it. She wants to build an amp at 5A3. No experience except watching my videos. What kit would I recommend, or don't try it? I've said this a lot, and I'll say it again, but I will say it succinctly this time, hopefully. Don't build an amp yet. The 5A3 is a great choice when you do build your first amp. Go build some effects pedals first. Go build a fuzz box, build a tube screamer, build a King of Tone clone, whatever. Get it so that you make all your mistakes at 9 volts. Where if you burn something, you're out $20, not $400. You can't electrocute yourself. If you burn something, it's not going to be expensive. You're going to make mistakes. You'll burn yourself. You'll melt insulation. You'll have bad solder joints. Things won't work. You'll have things hooked up backwards. That's the way to learn. Learn doing stuff that runs off a battery. And by the time you can build like 3 or 4 of those in a row and no mistakes and everything works and you're pleased with it, and you'll see your soldering improve along the way, your knowledge of how to connect the dots, improves all along the way. Then you get a amp kit, and then work really slowly. Don't get cocky because you built a tube screamer and think you can make the 5A3 work, or take shortcuts. Still, read the directions 3 times, picture it out, draw it out in your own words if you need to, and then do it. But don't dive in straight to the amp, because most people will fail, and not only will they want to think that they cannot do it at all, but they may not even realize that they failed, and it could be an unsafe operating condition. Hey, Joe. No, they don't make capacitor kits for the DSL-40C. If I had a DSL-40C that needed parts, I'd replace I'd order the parts that's necessary from DigiKey or Mauser. But I don't buy capacitor kits for anything. I know there are amps that I work on all the time that people sell capacitor kits for. I have a box over there I just ordered with like 60 22 microfarad 500 volt caps. I've got another box, with like 20 70 microfarad 350 volt caps. I buy in bulk, and I make my amp kits. And if there's something I don't have, and like a DSL-40C, it's going to be 47 microfarad 450 volts, and that's 12 millimeter lead spacing, and it's 30 millimeters wide and 18 millimeters high, whatever. I just get out my calipers and figure out what I need to order. Hey, David had to repair his DSL-40C R9 was arcing from a trace beneath it, also arcing to. Okay. Oh yeah, I saw this on Brad's channel. Apparently, the glue in some of the older DSL-40s is becoming conductive. Very nice of Marshall to do this. This is one of the few modern models that I've recommended, because the ones that I'd had that came in did not have any repeat problems, no systemic problems. And Brad has noticed that many of the ones he's had in lately have had this arcing. I imagine it's the nasty brown glue. It's definitely a problem, but is usually solvable. And a dental pick, a very small flat-headed screwdriver, and isopropyl alcohol will remove an awful lot of that stuff, sometimes with a little bit of heat to help it along. It's a shame that we have to do that on these things. I do that all the time on amps, but it's only in the last year or so that seems to have been a problem with the DSL-40 series. And shame on Marshall. They keep making insulating things which conduct for no good reason. You'd think they would have figured it out after the DSL, TSL amps. On a vintage Super Reverb, what original speakers do I like the most? Alnico Ceramic, CTS, Jensen, Oxford. My favorite speakers, possibly my favorite speaker in the world, is the original CTS Alnico. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be all original. It can be reconed. It should be reconed by someone who knows what they're doing, who can get the original kit. But that's a very unique speaker in that it's got a 1.5-inch voice coil. Very hard to find that in a 10-inch speaker, let alone a 10-inch Alnico. That is a glorious sounding speaker. But if I had a client who had a Super Reverb, and that was out of, just not attainable for whatever reason, that can be expensive. I think that I know for a fact that the G10C and the G10C and the ET10 are both fantastic choices for that amp. I've not had any of the new Jensens that I've cared for. I've tried the Italian Jensens and Super Reverb, the new ones, and they're very bright. And an amp that does not need, in a way that the amp does not get along with. And I've never been a fan of the old Oxfords in a Super Reverb. But that's me. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. Let's see. Hey, George Badea. Sorry, I saw your question. This question you asked it last week, right at the very end, and I didn't get to it. It is derived from a 62 AC15, which is an amp that Vox has not made since 1968, 69, and no one has done too many things that are too close to it. And there's some things that I really like about that amp. It'll have some differences, but one of the things it will do is that sound of the EF86 channel. I'm not doing the tremolo from the old Vox because there's so many digital tremolo pedals. You can do that harmonic trim or the opto or the bias, whatever you want, in a pedal form. But the sound of the amp cannot be done in a pedal, or has not yet. Thanks for asking. Hey, Matt Johnson. I think I'm having, community coffee, cafe especial. That's what's in here. I'm doing iced today because it's very, very warm here. Hey, Leanne 67. Leanne 67. Sorry, my eyes are not working as well today as I might hope. How effective are tube dampening rings on loud combo amps for preventing microphonics? They're not at all. I answered this at the beginning of last week's stream in more detail, and I talked about many of the downsides and the few upsides and what you can, if you really want to have them, the cheaper way to do it than buying them for valves for tubes. But they don't do much. I spent all day yesterday up on a ladder scraping paint and sanding, and I'm going to be doing some stripper today, not the fun kind. And last week I was down in the basement running 3/4 inch PEX for the new hose bibs, the Silcox. They're words that always make my wife giggle. And when I said, "Hey, sweetheart, I got us a new frost-proof 12-inch Silcox," that was it. Game over. I mean, I wasn't trying to brag or anything. It's just a fact. I've got a 12-inch Silcox. Let's see. Hey, Ron Benz, my amp has 4 output tubes. I only have 2 match pairs. What's the best way to position these tubes? Thanks. All right. These 4 fingers are the 4 tubes. These 2 are pushing, these 2 are pulling, or vice versa. So if you have one match pair, put one here and one here. If the other match pair, put one here and one here. And the way that works is if each pair is matched, let's say that they're 6L6s, and these 2, this match pair, each one draws 30. And this pair, each one draws 25. So we got 30 and 25 and 30 and 25, so 55 per side. If we were to do it the other way, we had 30, 30, 25, 25, we have 60 on one side and 50 on the other, and then you don't have a balanced quad. Your output is not balanced, and so it's going to go that way. You're going to hear hum because it's not going to have the equal amount of cancellation. One pair of tubes will draw more than the other pair of tubes. But if you have 25, 30, 30, 25, it doesn't matter, 25, 30, 25, 30, as long as you have one from each match pair per side, you'll be fine. I do that all the time when I test amps. If I don't have a matched quad, I'll make a close enough with matched quad with 2 sets of matched pairs. Yeah, Ted's right. I mean, the film caps that Solon does make that are larger than 2 microfarad are huge. Like, I don't have anything here for comparison, but larger than this end of this flashlight, much. Anyway, whereas the equivalent electrolytic is very small. Well, Matt, check out my DR103 videos. I've got a couple of more than a couple, but I've got some high watt videos, and I try to show the inside very clearly. And I think if you have the published layout in front of you, you can look at my pictures and say, oh, he did that different, or oh, that's the same. Oh, hi, Mark. I did not hit her. I did not. I want to bring do the technical difficulties again, and I would love to have Merlin on here. I've never met Merlin. The issue with people across the pond is they're going to sleep when I'm waking up, and vice versa. So I would love to get in touch with Merlin. I'd love to have him on. Hey, Bill, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. It's going to depend on the speaker. It's going to depend on the bias. It's going to depend on how hot it's running. And that can depend on what rectifier tube you have. The 69, I think by 69, they've gone from 10K to 2.7K, 10K on the dropping resistors, and the deluxes with the 2.7K have a much higher preamp B plus than the ones with dual 10Ks. So it will be cleaner. It's not and it also depends on the taper of the volume pot, because what's 3 on one volume pot may be 5 on another volume pot. So I wouldn't worry about it. The real way to tell the output is to measure the output on a scope, and I do that from time to time on amps, especially with an amp with which I'm less familiar. But on a deluxe reverb, I can usually tell. It may be at 3, maybe at 4, but it's putting out what I expect it to be. So I can tell when it's too low, and I can tell when it doesn't have enough headroom. But there's a normal range of variation. I think of it as they have personalities. Hey, PWTs read that power tubes with a beam-focused grid are more efficient than those with a suppressor grid. Is if it's true? If so, why are EL34, 84s so widely used? Well, they're very, very different things. EL84s are very, very different tubes than EL34s. Trying to decide how far to get into this because I don't have any examples here. And I think if Seth B were here, if Seth B is here. Hey, Seth. Seth, this is one of the things you love to talk about. Go for it. I apologize to you, Seth, that you're going to have to do like 23-sentence answers instead of one big block of text. But the difference between valves and two types, it's not a true beam tetrode, and that's, and pentode and all this stuff. And people who care about this stuff really, really care about it. And there are things that are real, and there are things that I think are a little less important. But, EL34 and 6L6 are almost interchangeable if you wire the socket so that you can interchange them. They're very different in how they work. I don't worry too much about efficiencies. I care about what it sounds like, and that a 6L6 sounds different than an EL34, which sounds different from a 60A7 slightly, which sounds different than a KT66 to a large degree, which does sound different than a 6L6, but they are very similar tubes to the musician. EL84s are very different than a 34. They're still a pentode, but anyway. Again, this is the kind of thing you want to look into a book, or maybe Seth is going to have a chapter here, and I'm going to defer to Seth on this because Seth knows more about old tubes and how they're built than I do. I know how they sound, I know how to bias them, I know how to design with them, but he knows things about, hey, the halo was at a 3-degree different angle on this, and it changed the sound entirely. I sound like I'm making fun of him. I'm not. I just got to say, when someone's here who knows more than I do, I say, hey, everyone meet Seth B. Hey, Rick Vieira, I don't have any knowledge of a KSR Orion. I don't know what a KSR Orion is. I apologize. Let's see. Hey, Strum Bum. Just picked up a 68 drip edge Princeton Reverb. Only thing down is 3-prong chord. Everything else is original. Amp sounds good, no noise. How important is it to change the caps? Well, it's from 1968, and that means it's 3 years older than I am. And parts of me have been wearing out for a good long while now. Those caps are designed to last 20, 30 years. They're designed to last 15 to 20 years, but people got 20, 30 years out of them. In general, one of three things will happen if you don't change the caps. You don't change the caps, and over time it gets noisy, and you're like, hey, okay, now it doesn't sound so great, I'll change those caps. Or you don't change out those caps, and it sounds great, and you think, well, I don't see what all the fuss is. This thing sounds great. I'm not going to change these caps. And the third thing that can happen is indistinguishable from the second thing that'll happen until it's too late. Because the third thing that'll happen is, man, this thing sounds great. I don't see any need to change these. I'm just going to leave them as they are. So we're back to part two, right? Until you play one day and it blows up and catches on fire, and a lot of the original components are damaged, or you lose a transformer because those caps failed in a dramatic way. They can cause trauma when they fail. So, as the difference between option 2, I didn't change the caps and everything was great, and option 3, I didn't change the caps and everything was great until I roasted the transformer, can be a matter of 5 minutes, and you don't know when that 5 minutes is going to happen. I say protect the transformers, protect the overall investment, change out the cap. Then you know it's going to be good. But there are people who will differ with me, and I think they secretly want your amps to die. Hey, I suggest an inexpensive multimeter. In the description of all my videos is the Thisendi 18B that I've got 2 of them there. And I think it's been discontinued, so the one on the left is now a Thisendi 19B. But they're all over Amazon. If you're just, I use them, and I do a lot more than most DIY maintainers. You need to be able to measure and auto range, DC, AC, either in the milliamps or millivolts or amps and volts range, hundreds of volts. You need to measure capacitance. You need to be able to test the diode. It's all the basic stuff. There's not much you couldn't do with one of these. The 19 is the same thing, only it adds the ability to connect special leads where you can measure temperature. Now you can, if you're going to be going out and being a lineman, or doing electrical installs for people, maybe the client's going to be more rugged, or it may be worthwhile spending a lot of money to get I can't think of the name. The one I had before, the big expensive one I had before that everyone has. Anyway, if I were going to be going out installing air conditioners for people, crawling into people's houses, I'd have a great big yellow expensive one, all insulated, built for the road. Just take whatever slings and arrows of misfortune are waiting for it. But for bench work like this, these $20 ones are just fine, and it will absolutely read a battery that's DC on a low setting. But Klein is all over the map as far as quality. Fluke, thank you, Pastor. Why couldn't I think of the Fluke meter? It's almost synonymous. It's like Kleenex. Fluke. It was a fluke occurrence, but or non-occurrence. But Fluke's great if you need that ruggedness, or if you have need of specialty functions that a basic meter won't provide. But for the average guitarist, to make a cable, make sure you have continuity and you don't have a short, to measure if your 9 volts working. Hey, what's coming in, what's plugged in, what's coming out of my wall right now? Hey, I'm at 119 volts AC, or I'm at 127 volts AC, or I'm at 90 volts AC. $20 meter will do all that. It's in the description, all the videos. You can spend more if you want to. Well, see, New York City geology agrees with me, and he has an underscore in geology. Would it be wise to change the 30K 20 watt and 2.7K 10 watt resistors plus the bridge rectifier diodes and ceramic disc caps in my basement 70, although they are in spec and free from leakage? That's a tricky one, Eckert, because it's hard to find a replacement 30K 20 watt. The rest of them are easy to find. On the two big ceramics, the 10 watt and the 20 watt, usually they're telltale signs if they're faulty, besides the fact that they won't measure what they're supposed to measure. You might find a discoloration or a crack or a little flecks of stuff have been coming off of them, in which case they do need to be replaced. I tend to prefer wire wounds like a Dale Vichy, or similar coated wire wound to the ceramic box caps, mostly because the leads are more rugged. But that 20 watt's a little bit tough to find because most companies now don't make a 20 watt version of a 30K. You would go to a chassis mount. As far as the rest, the diodes and ceramic disc caps are much more likely to fail than the other two. And the 2.7K is more likely to fail than the 10 watt. But they may all just be fine. Hey, Basil. Thank you very much. What challenges do cathode biased amps solve? To an extent, they solve the need to bias an amp. They solve the need for a larger, more powerful power transformer. Well, that's actually, no, wait, that's the wrong way to look at this. That's more of a trade-off. I don't want to give you misleading information. Cathode bias amps traditionally are less expensive to build. There are fewer parts. And you are sacrificing potential output level, but you're also getting certain sounds. But in terms of challenges, what challenges do they solve? I don't know that from a modern perspective, that they solve any challenges. I think at the time it was a way to offer a very rugged, simple circuit that would work because you don't have to have any variable bias supply. You didn't have to use a bias tap or derived bias from a power transformer. So my initial answer was correct, but I realized that there's a greater current draw from cathode bias, so I didn't want to be misleading. But you can use a less expensive power transformer because you don't have to use a dedicated bias winding or derive it, which adds to the parts complication for a bias circuit. So it's a simpler way to get an amp on the market. For some companies, there's a way to have an amp at the market at a lower tier to undercut the competition, maybe. But it can also be a viable choice just to say, hey, this is going to work more simply. And the only real challenge is the heat dissipation. But now the heat dissipation of a 10 watt resistor is easy. Back in the day, that was a more rare value to be able to find. So I don't think there's any challenges today, but they sound different, and I think they offer different playing experiences today. All right, we're going to take our first of two 7-minute intermissions. And Joe Bucci, look in the description for any of the videos I put out in the last 3 years, and I list the gear that I use. And we'll be back in 7 minutes. Stretch your legs, get a sandwich, get a cup of coffee, whatever you need to do, and I'll see you in a little bit. All right, coming back a little bit early, and during the break, I learned something new. Apparently, all HVAC techs are named Josh, except for my friend Dave. So I have to work on that theory a bit more. But yeah, Josh Stevens and Josh Roberts are both HVAC techs. Both are using flukes out in the field, and the other one that they were measuring the field, whatever. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you're out there and it's exposed to rain, exposed to being dropped, real hardcore situations, rugged, continued use out there, yeah, get a fluke. But, when my old fluke died, and I was looking at the flukes that did what it did, and they were like $200 and up. And there's a time during COVID when I had no guarantee of an income for a while. I was like, well, I'm going to take a chance on one of those meters on Amazon that some techs had said were decent as backups. It does everything I need. It's accurate. And so I've got 3 of them, so I can do a whole bunch of stuff at once for all the total cost. 3 meters plus some upgraded leads. I've got like $100 in the whole setup. And for the meters, it's probably $75. Especially for a musician to have at home, the $20 ones are absolutely fine. But if you want to get the fluke, go for it. You'll have that inborn sense of superiority that so many of us want to purchase. Did Amnesia, hey, did, is 65 AB 165. Volume starts at 2, breaks up at 3. Should I add a master volume? Is that sacrilege? Side question, how many pedals do I max out when gigging? How many is too many? Well, I don't know. That's pretty much what an AB165 does. It's loud at 3, and then above that it begins to break up. And so 2 is a gigging level for a clean sound. It is a very, very loud amp. And I do recommend to a lot of people that unless you're going to go to the aux box or SUR reactive load or whatever, Fryette power station rig, then a master volume makes a lot of sense for those amps because they are loud. And it's an odd circuit that they came up with. I have no idea why they chose to give it that much gain for a bass amp. But they did, and we all benefit from it in the long run. But yeah, they really benefit from a master volume. And I've shown how to install Larmar in those. Let's see. I've not tried the Mojo Tone Pedalboard kits. I don't do kits very often. I did use some Arion kits. Not Arion. That's a old chorus pedal I had. Eon, which are quite good kits. But there are a lot of options. If you search pedal kits, you'll find a lot of good, just look at the reviews and see who sells a kit for a pedal that you'd like to have. But start simple when trying to build these things yourself. Yeah, the Celestion Golds sound fantastic in Vibrolux and Super Reverbs. It's just that the Celestion Gold is probably the most expensive 10-inch speaker, or one of the most expensive 10-inch speakers on the market. So if you're sure that that's the sound you'll love, go for it. But it is a big expense, and it is a little bit of a specialty sound. It doesn't sound like the CTS Sonicos that were in there originally, and it doesn't have necessarily the some of the clarity of the liquidity of the mids that I like with some ceramic speakers in a Super Reverb, but it has its own kind of thing. It's a little bit throatier. But talking about music's like dancing about architecture. Welcome to my architectural dancing video channel, whatever thing. I'm still a bit out of it. Community coffee. Equals my grandma in Mississippi. Wonderful memories of that coffee, a front porch swing, and hummingbird feeders. Yeah, my wife's got hummingbird feeders out in the backyard. And Joe here says, any particular brand of coffee I prefer? He's a Maxwell House Folgers kind of guy. Well, usually I get Maxwell House French roast, but it's become so occasionally very expensive, like $14, where it used to be $6 or $7 for a big tub. So when the Maxwell House is too expensive, I've been getting the community coffee, Cafe Especial, which I find to be very nice. My favorite of the pre-ground coffees, because I don't have time to grind coffee in the morning. I cannot operate heavy machinery before I've had coffee. So to operate machinery to get the beans ready to make coffee, I'd never have coffee. I'd never wake up. I just stay in bed. Why even bother? Sorry, side note. French Truck has got some phenomenal coffees, but they are way too expensive for me to spend on myself for coffee, especially since given how much coffee I drink. But if I were to gonna have maybe the family over for a pancake breakfast on Christmas or something, I'd probably get some French Truck for that to share with people. Otherwise, I'd just be spending, $20 for 4 days worth of coffee for me. On that note, I don't go to Starbucks and places like that very often because waste of money, and often to end up with subpar coffee because I've never had anything at Starbucks worth drinking. Hey, to Guitar Garage. I got into amp repair because my amps were broken and I could not afford to hire someone to fix them. So I went to the library and got some books on it and made a bunch of mistakes and did it until I was no longer making mistakes. And then I did it because it was kind of interesting. And for better or worse, here I am. It's not anything that I would recommend. It's not a path I'd recommend to anyone. This is how to do it. It's probably the world's worst way to do it, but it's what worked for me. We're gonna skip the pet cock and fleshlight jokes. Silcock's Amusement Arcade in Southport near Liverpool. Okay, Rambo Ding Dong. Looking for earlier breakup on a Super Reverb. Well, you could trade with Did in his AB165. Do I prefer certain tubes? Would I consider removing the V1 preamp tube and using only the vibrato channel? I cannot answer that question because I don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. I will say that a Super Reverb is designed to react to these. It's actually designed to react a certain way to Jazzmaster with flats, like flat 11s. But I don't have one of those. It was also designed to work well with these. And I bet your Super Reverb with one of these is reacting exactly as designed. So there are two things you can do. You can get a boost pedal and make the level of that hotter. You can play something like this, these P90s, much hotter. Amp was never designed for this, but this gives the sound. Or you can modify the amp, or start by just pulling V1, and V2 is going to have more gain, just because the cathode will be different. But it's not night and day. People are like, hey, can you disconnect the vibrato and pull this tube? I'm like, oh, someone's read the Stevie Ray Vaughan articles. Stevie Ray would have sounded the exact same way into your amp without any mods. So I think people make a lot of changes to amps, chasing all this stuff, and you could have Stevie Ray's amp and you'd sound like yourself, because so much of what he did was so much of what he did. And I don't know, it is so easy to add gain today with all these pedals and stuff, Go get a Prince of Tone or one of the clones of it, or get a clone of a what's the one that used to be dirt cheap that now Uncle Larry's made unaffordable for everyone. There's so many good, very light overdrive pedals. You can even just keep the gain down and turn the level up a bit, and make the Strat pickups react to the amp like P90s would, and be very happy for $75. I'm sorry, I sound like a old curmudgeon, and it's in my interest to tell you how to modify amps, and we're gonna do all these things, and you send me your money, and I'll make your amp play itself for you. But I'd rather have repeat business, so I'd rather say, well, you know what? Make sure you have the right guitar, the right pedals. The amp's doing exactly what that amp's designed to do. If that's not the sound for you, you may want to sell your Super Reverb and get a JTM45, because that does a different thing, or an AC30, which does the thing a little bit easier too. I wouldn't try to make a Super Reverb sound like another amp. I guess it's the short version of that. Hey, Joachim, what's my opinion on tube testers? Most of them are garbage. Most of them are overpriced garbage. The Maxi Matcher is really good. And you can make, there are some on the market that are very, very good, but they tend to be very, very expensive. And most of the ones sold to individuals are not very good. I don't have one myself because I happen to live 20 minutes from Tube Depot, and I have a good relationship with those guys and Michelle. So it's not just guys. And if I need a tube tested, they'll test it for me. And they've got a very nice, well-calibrated Maxi Matchers that my buddy Rob did for them when he was working there. So it can be great. I wish Brad were here, because Brad and his dad know more about that world because they've built them, and he knows what's happening underneath the box. But I'm leery of most affordable tube testers. Hey Ian, 72 Deluxe came with a 12-inch Oxford that doesn't sound very good. Yeah, you enjoyed the C12Q. It's not a bad sounding speaker, but it's not going to have any real authority with a Deluxe. What other speakers should I look at? I've got a lot of videos comparing speakers with Deluxe reverbs. Look for those on the channel. I've shown Veteran 30, which is pretty much the same as a Vintage 30, ET65, G12C, the stock C12K, the Alessandro SC64, whatever it's called, Alnico Blues are surprisingly a cool choice if you're not pushing the wattage too hard. But I've got a lot of videos where I show, hey, this is the same performance into the same app, and the mic's in the same location. The only thing that was changed was the speaker. I cannot choose your favorite flavor of anything, but I can show you, hey, these are the ones that you might very much like, because most people like these very much, and they're not going to die. So, hey, Jeb and Joe Outdoors, any thoughts on the Supro Airwave? Well, thank you very much for that. I have not tried the Airwave. I have not tried a Supro made after 1970 that was worth its price tag. Various eras of the company have been doing various bad things. Really consistently bad designs, poor build quality. Now, I've not tried the Airwave. Maybe it's fantastic, but I would be very skeptical. But I'd love to be wrong, but until I have an Airwave in front of me, I won't have an opinion on it. Every other Supro from the Zinke era and the current era that I have tried has been absolute garbage, though, so they would have to do a lot to win me over. I have no opinion on diesel quality, because diesel does not have quality fixer. Diesels are amazingly badly built inside. They look real cool in a certain way from the outside, but the last one I was asked to fix was a charred mess inside, so I did not fix it. And I've seen other techs encounter multiple bad issues inside. So I think Brad has more information on that than I do, but I would tend to avoid them myself. As long as I'm not an old curmudgeon, Bill, I'm a prematurely gray curmudgeon. And those fucking clouds, man. Let me tell you about those clouds. Everyone's always like, oh, the poor clouds, stop shouting at them. Let me tell you about those goddamn clouds, all right? I know what they're up to. About 30,000 feet. Let's see here. Do I feel there are any good current production Marshall type amps with reverb on board? I realize that this deviates from the original Marshall circuit, but I really like having a reverb built in. No. No. Digital reverb usually sucks, at least at the scale of digital reverb that people put into amps, because they're all made by 2 or 3 little companies, and they're just kind of, hey, have reverb. Compared to what's available in every pedal out there, they're all horrible. And spring reverb is not the right sound with a Marshall. There are, however, very good sounding Marshall amps which offer very good quality effects loops, where you could then run a very nice sounding digital reverb or delay in the effects loop, low impedance buffered. Now, to the purists like Friedman and Sir, don't put an effects loop in their 68 Marshall amps, because that defeats the purpose. But they have other amps which do very similar sounds, which do have very good effects loops, as does Metropolis. So there are ways to do that, but tube reverb doesn't sound good with one. The inbuilt digital reverb is almost always crappy, but it's very nice when one of those amps has a good bypassable effects level controlled effects loop. And then you can use anything you want. You can get what's it, the Noya whatever reverbs that are out there now, and or you can put a Big Sky in there or whatever. There's so many good options in pedals these days for reverb, which will work fine in an effects loop. And that's the way to do it. Or just play and track dry and add it in post. That's what Jimmy Page always did, when he wasn't just running an Echoplex into the front. It wasn't always an Echoplex. Sometimes it was a really cheap delay set to a slapback. Almost every meter was auto ranging unless it's sold at a hardware store. Well, given that Seth and the Joshes are here talking to you about meters, they're going to know. You're going to already have good advice about the meters. Hey, Ian Hilton, I'm not criticizing you, and I'm not singling you out. They're just a great example. I think this is the 3rd time in a row that I've run across this question. I will get to every question in the order that it was asked, and sometimes it takes me a while to get to it. I asked yours the first time it was asked. I answered yours the first time I saw it, and then after that I saw it another 2 times. It's harder for me to see all the questions if I'm getting repeats. Sometimes I might, did it scroll up? Am I in the wrong, where I used to be? Hey, Dan, do I think in 20 years' time the landfills will be stuffed with fractals and Kempers because they can't be fixed, just like all the other digital modelers? Well, I think there are 2 parts to that. First of all, the landfills are also going to be filled with Blues Juniors and Hot Rod DeVilles and Marshall Origins, which don't have any digital in them. They're just built poorly. So there's a lot of stuff in this argument of the landfill. And even if, I've certainly seen issues with the Kemper build quality and Kemper repair processes and whether or not they even fix their stuff. But when it comes to the Fractal or the Line 6, even if the Fractal is built perfectly and lasts 45 years before it needs a battery changed, it will still be in the landfill because of the nature of what it is, which is a model of a real thing, which means that if you have the Fractal 4, and it's perfect. And then the fractal 5 comes out. Well, you want to get the fractal 5, and all of a sudden the fractal 4 is not worth as much as it was. Meanwhile, no one wants the fractal 3s anymore because they're buying all the used fractal 4s, and the fractal 3s end up in the landfill. So you're always chasing the next best thing, because the next one's got Bluetooth, and the next one's got speech recognition, and the next one's got blah, 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 and which makes the old one obsolete in the eyes of the user. Whereas a 50-watt Marshall, it's not going to be a version. Now it takes Wi-Fi. Who cares? We don't need that. There are other reasons that older amps can become obsolete. Well, okay, use the tube type. We can't get anymore. Or 100-watt Marshall is just too loud to use anywhere. And that's true for the most part, but there are good options these days with the aux boxes and the power stations and installing high-quality master volumes. So there are ways to make the old amps not obsolete. Now, if all the tubes disappear entirely, it's another thing, in which case we're going to be fighting each other, going through those landfills, trying to find the fractal 3s. But there are certain things that even if it's perfect, you want to get the next best version of. Now, like Seth B here says, I'm not saying that fractals fractals are really well built in comparison to a lot of this stuff. But yeah, nothing's perfect. And man, there are so many things out there with the cheapest fucking output jacks on the back in these things. I just saw Brad fixing one, and I'm like, who chooses that? Someone who's only taken electronics courses in college, and they have a degree and all that, but they have never had to do any field repairs or seen anything that was dropped, or seen anything that was in a gig bag in the back of a van for 500 miles. So. Hey, Underground Engineer. Underground Engineer has a hand-wired boutique that uses Jupiter vintage tone capacitors in a number of places. Do these really impact the tone, or is it snake oil? I'm going to say something which sounds contradictory. It is not snake oil, but at the same time, it does not make a fundamental difference. If I were to take that amp from you and put in very similar sounding capacitors of similar materials of the same values, you may or may not know that I've done this. You may prefer the new sound to the old sound if you do hear any difference. There's metallicized film versus true film, and there's polyester and there's polyurethane, and all these things. The Jupiters are polyester. And the Jupiters are quite good, but on a certain level, they're selling a cosmetic look more than they're selling the actual sound. They'll talk about the actual sound because they have to. They're in business to do this thing. And there is a market for this, and they're serving a role on the market. They're meeting a demand. I don't think that they're creating the demand. The demand's already there, so people want to have long yellow caps that are red or that are yellow, because their old amp had ones that were red or yellow, where the labels look a little bit like an old Crayola label, because that's what they're used to from the old Astron. So here comes Jupiter, and they make something which is actually very nice. It's a good quality capacitor, and it has the right look, or close enough to the right look for people, and so people want it. But it's really for those who just want to look at their amp rather than play their amp, because I can put in some Vishay MKT 1813s. You won't hear much difference. I could put in some Sozos. You won't hear much difference. In some amps, I could put in a 600 PS orange drop. You won't hear much difference. But for those who want it to look a certain way, the Jupiter serves that role, and it is a high-quality capacitor. So it is not a bad product being sold to create a demand. The demand was there. People want things that look a certain way, because guitarists are fundamentally conservative about such weird little things and get obsessed about these little things that don't really matter. And so this company came along and said, hey, people want this. We can make it. We can make it. But because there is a demand, but it's not a huge demand for this, and the supply can only be so many because it's a small company, the supply is still going to be greater than the demand. Sorry, the demand is still going to be greater than supply, and to make things in small quantities is expensive. So a capacitor from Jupiter that would be $1.50 from any other brand out there, or $2, is $7 to $9 for the Jupiter version. And that's just, if you want Jupiter, that's the price you have to pay, because that's as low as they can make the damn thing and still keep their doors open and their lights on and their employees fed or paid. So I have no ill will towards Jupiter. But, it's like, hey, why is a Rolex so expensive? Because the market was gutted because everyone has smartphones. And so to make any money, people still do want watches, mechanical watches, but it's a very small percentage of the market that still wants a mechanical watch. Therefore, Rolex, to stay in business, is going to sell fewer than they used to, so the prices go up. Same thing for Jupiter caps. Not that they're Rolex level expensive, but I think there's nothing wrong with what's in your amp, but it's not the only choice that would have given you a great sound. Hey, Thomas C., can I talk about the difference in a well-designed PCB versus a badly designed PCB? What is well-designed to you? Well, there are a lot of factors in that. First of all, it needs to be relatively thick with some strength to it. Second of all, it needs to have copper on both sides, and any holes that tie them together should be through-hole plated. And it needs to have quite a bit of copper on both sides. So that's fundamental. So it's rigid, structurally strong, enough flex that it's not going to crack, but not enough spring that's going to vibrate or go boingy boingy. And you want to have enough copper that's going to hold up, and both sides so it can handle heat and all these things. Next comes who's building it and who's designing it. So you need to make sure that whoever designed it understands that these are high current, high temperature devices. And the same thing that lets you get an iPhone crammed into tiny little spaces inside here will result in a very noisy amplifier that might actually catch on fire. You've got to use very old approaches to how these things are done, which are not really taught very much or are glossed over in modern engineering schools. You need to have someone who understands the difference between ground, shield, AC negative, DC negative, DC midpoint, et cetera, et cetera. When those roles can be the same, when they should be separated, and when they are separated, how they are eventually joined in the circuit. You want to have enough space between traces that you don't have crosstalk or arcing. You want to have enough trace thickness that for things to have plenty of current, as much current as they need, and then a little excess. And people who design PCBs for guitar amps specifically should be taken out back and kicked in the head 7 times if they use ground planes. And if they use ground planes that don't have thermal pads, then they should be left out in the field to rot. I've become more and more discouraged with PCB designers because they design it like it's a kitchen clock that runs off a 3-volt battery. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. That'll buy me some more inexpensive coffee. Hey, Toombs, is putting an effects loop kit in a single-channel PCB tube amp a task that would be for a tech, or do I think someone who can solder guitars together can handle it? I can't answer that because I don't know how how well someone solders a guitar does it, because I've seen a lot of people who work on guitars all the time, and they even charge money for it, and their soldering skill is non-existent. And I don't know whether the kit would have to have very clear instructions. The person would have to have very good technique and know a little bit more about circuits than necessary, strictly speaking, for the job at hand. When in doubt, I think someone in that position might be well off to say, hey, find someone in their area who works on amps and say, hey, I work on guitars and I need to have this installed in my amp, and I would really like to pay you to do it, but could I slip you an extra 20 and you can tell me what you're doing as you're doing it, so the next time I might be able to do it myself. I'm interested in this, but I understand there are things here I don't know. That would probably be the safest approach if you can find a tech who'd be willing to let someone look over their shoulder while doing it. But I cannot say, yes, someone who can wire a guitar can do this, because half the people out there who think they can wire a guitar cannot wire a guitar. I'm not saying you're one of those, but I see it all the time. Hey, DMAC, avoid the 68 custom deluxe reverb. And the G12 V70 speakers crap. Get the 65 reissue. You want a 65 reissue deluxe reverb, not the 68 custom. Get it used, not new. And the 65 usually comes with a Jensen C12K, which also sucks. It doesn't fail as much as the G12 V70, but it doesn't sound very good. So expect to change out the speaker. But the 65 reissue deluxe reverb is a really good amp. It just sold with a terrible speaker. The 68 custom is a terrible amp sold with a terrible speaker. Hey, Jeff Dorman, I don't know if I received your email inquiry. I will check after this. I'm sorry. There are days when I check email and then everything seems to be okay. And, other than the general influx of spam. And then I'll skip it for a few days and I'll miss 500 emails. But I try to stay on top of it and then it just goes crazy. But I'll check after this, Jeff. I appreciate that. Hey, Jeff, Mom's doing much better, thanks. Unlike Seth B, I'm sorry, Seth. It's really home. I mean, sorry, you said home. It's really tough. I thought I was going to be in your situation, and I probably will be again within the next decade, but still got a little more time on our end. But yes, it's tough. I'm sorry to hear that, Seth. That's right, Uncle Larry I always feel weird calling him Uncle Larry. I think he's younger than I am. Tom, if you ever see this, how old are you? I don't want to call you Larry, you kid. Uncle, that is. Noble's ODR1. You want to come on my channel, though, Tom, I'll call you whatever you want, except late for dinner. Yeah, yeah. If you want more drive from your Fender amp and you have a 335 versus a Strat or a Tele, that's what they're there for. I see people, especially on the digital forums where there are people who do videos about how to use digital pedals and stuff, they'll say, man, how do I get the level set so that when I go from my Tele to my Les Paul, it sounds the same? I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Why would you want a Les Paul to sound like a Tele or vice versa? You want to have the thing set up so that it reacts perfectly with either, and it's not going to go into digital clipping. But beyond avoiding digital clipping, if here's digital clipping, and here's where the resolution is so low it doesn't sound very good, anywhere in between is fine. So if your Tele's here and your Les Paul is here, that's exactly where you want it to be, and you want them to sound different. Otherwise, why not just have one guitar? Have your digital modeling signal generator, and I'm not saying that you're doing that rumble and ding dong. I was springboarding onto a larger rant. I've only had one or two of the modern magnetones in. Four. They're really well built overall. I think they might be a little overpriced, but I don't know how many people work for them, what their volume is like. You know, it's like I was talking about Jupiter caps. They seem relatively expensive for what they are, for what you get. And I've seen some, one of the models, I don't remember what it was called. It was a little combo with two EL84s. It was cathode biased, and it was biased crazy hot. And I cooled the bias on those down so that only running at 110% versus like 180%. And the amp still sounded great, but was going to sound great for the entire tour rather than dying a week later, as it was intending to do. But other magnetones I've had in, like the one with the stereo tremolo, sounded great. But what I did notice about that, it was not the actual magnetone model that it said it was. It had the tremolo, the vibrato from the actual magnetone, but the preamp circuit in that was a deluxe reverb. They did not replicate the actual 60s magnetone amplifier. It was just a stereo output version of a deluxe reverb with the magnetone trim, which obviously is what the market wants. But I don't know how many of those buyers who spend $4,000 to $5,000 for that thing actually know that they're not getting a true magnetone. They're getting half magnetone. I'm not going to read all your comments on your mom's cancer here, Seth, but you're my thoughts. Hey, Strum Bum. The bathroom remodel is not done, but it is making good progress. I've got to finish some other stuff up and then put the new ceiling in place. Then I can start mudding, and I got to actually run some electrical wires, and it's time to put drywall and mud and start to put it back together. Hey, Brad, thanks for joining us. I got something to show off to you, Brad, a little bit. Yeah. What Seth here said. I've not seen any modern super amps I pay more than $100 for. The older ones were well-functioning rat's nest. That's a kind way of putting it. Eckhart, okay. In your basement, $70 or two 15-inch speakers with square magnets installed. Are those ceramic or Alnico? I think they're probably Alnico, but I'm not a speaker expert on all speakers. There are speakers I know really well, and I have some level of extreme familiarity, but I would not call myself an expert. I have a true expert who lives who works 4 blocks from here at Halford Loudspeakers. When I have serious questions, I call Dave, and he'll tell me. But I imagine that those are probably Alnico, but they could be ceramic because it was a weird period for the 15-inch speakers. Seth B here probably knows more than I do about those things. He might have already answered that, though. Hey, Strum Bum, recommended rectifier on a new Princeton Reverb build. Most likely just a JJ or Sovtek GZ34 is going to be fine. You can spend more if you want on a better brand, but I find that they work or they don't. There's not much variation. Unless you want to do a 5U4GB, in which case you're going to have about a 30-volt drop, which you might really like the sound of, a little bit lower headroom, and a slightly different transient on the attack, but in which case you can get some new old stock 70s joint Army Navy 5U4GBs for like $35-40 over at Tube Depot. That'd be best if you're fine with it. the 5U4GB. But for a GZ34, the Sovtek and the JJ are fine when they're working, which is most of the time these days. And then Seth said about the same thing. Is it okay to put a Vintage 30 on my Marshall 800 combo 50 watt? Oh, Vintage 30 is a 60 or 65 watt amp. I would not want a 50 watt combo going into a single Vintage 30. 50 watts, you really want to have at least 75 watt speaker. I mean, you might be okay if you never turn it all the way up, and you always keep the master volume down a little bit. But as a rule of thumb, a 60 watt speaker with a 50 watt amp, you're skirting disaster. What do I think was the objective behind the various baseband circuit iterations? Well, I'm not sure, because there's so many changes in the baseband. And the really weird one is the AB165, because they just went so high gain and so dramatically into a kind of bizarre design language with the inverted output section with lots of negative feedback. I mean, not a ton, but on the mixing stage, there's quite a bit of negative feedback, and then each output stage plate, there's negative feedback. It's like they were trying something new. I do think that it was a design that Fender, as in Leo, was working on, and then he left the company, and then they made it. And I'm not sure, I don't know, because he stayed on as a consultant for a while. I'm not sure of this, but it seems to have issues that I think Leo might have ironed out before going to production if he were still running the show. But it went in production in '65. And, obviously we're still talking about it. People are still looking for it. It was a success, but it could have been so much better for actually less work and money on their end. If they just kept the AA864 power section and gone and just done more gain in the preamp, they would have a better amp. But it's so strange to me how much gain they added to the AB165, because none of their other amps ever got that much. You'd think maybe they would have done that to the Showman to really compete with all those newfangled Marshalls coming over, but they didn't do that. The Showman is just a non-reverb twin and a head form, so I don't know. It's strange. Ken Bauer says he's got a JCM 800 2203 purchased new in 1981 that came with 6550s. Found need to replace the output tubes, will most likely stick with 6550s. Were these biased as 25 or 35 watt tubes from the factory? With changing the bias circuit and switching to EL34s make much of a difference to the sound? Thanks. Well, there are 2 points to that question. Are they 35 watt tubes or are they 43 watt tubes? I always get those mixed up. Maybe I'm thinking of KT88s. They'd be biased as if they're 35 watt. If they're 35 watt tubes on the dash sheet, you buy them to 35 watts. You never bias a 6550 as if it's a 25 watt tube. Second, I have had, I think there were 279 50 watt leads, the early 2204s, come in from the same owner. And one of them he wanted 34s, one of them he wanted 6550s. And I made the EL34 circuit optimized for EL34. That's not just the changes to the bias, it's also increasing the screen grids to 1K, and I think it had 180K grid leaks in the phase inverter output. All the little things that are different. The 2 amps sounded almost the same. They sounded a little bit different from each other, but it's not like you played one and say, oh, that's the 6550s, played the next one, oh, that's the 34s. They really sounded so similar. They were almost indistinguishable. They looked different on a scope, but they didn't sound or play or feel different. So I think you can end up chasing your tail a little bit on that kind of thing. But if it's, I would just get some new 6550s and bias it for them and enjoy it. It's a great amp. Hey Sebastian, the Excalibur project's on hold because I've had so many other things going on, and I've got to find someone to make a thing that no one makes as far as a front panel. And I'm just wondering if I ever have any business making things like that, because I just don't have any control of my schedule these days. But I'd like to get some more made. I think they sound really nice. You know, I didn't make them just to have my name on something. I made something as I wanted it to sound really nice, and they do. But I also know that I could make them and be a flavor of the month for a minute, and then someone come out with something with a fancy paint job, and it would sound like shit, be terribly built, but it's got a fancy paint job, and I'm just not set up to do fancy paint jobs. So, you know, it's tricky. There are times when I get a bit grumpy and a bit dour. I think WS left because he's mad at me about not understanding Scotland's European connections. I can talk about the connection with the French during the whole Jacobite Revolution and all that stuff, but I think he's already gone. So maybe he's just too dour. The Marshall MG100 DFX comes with a 4-ohm speaker, has 2 little impedance for the amp. Mine is crapped out continuously over the years. I also installed a CPU fan in it to stop overheating. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not familiar with the MG100 DFX. I think I might have had one come in that had one bad solder joint. I don't know whether it's the wrong impedance. I don't know whether your amp is crapped out or whether the speakers are crapped out. A lot of times it's bad speakers that are going to be included with that line of Marshall amps. Exactly, Seth. Ground is not ground. I was trying to allude to it rather than give a blow-by-blow description. Well, the Trouble Working Player 53, he says, just let a local builder make you a deluxe reverb, whether it's a 68 style or not, because they might be better built than the mass-built reissue Fenders is selling. The trouble is they might, but they probably won't be. I see so many terrible amps being sold as boutique builds. And the honest reality is that a lot of them out there are crappy, and they'll have no resale value because it's not going to have a known brand on it. Whereas the Fender, which has strengths and weaknesses, will have and retain some level of value because it is a known quantity on the market. So there are a lot of people who build deluxe reverbs of varying levels of quality, but I don't think you can just say a local builder can do better than Fender is doing these days, because Fender is at least they're consistent. They're not great, but they're consistent. And local builders are all over the map. So find someone who's really known for doing a good one, and make sure that the people giving, and that all the reviews that are good are real. It's tricky. Is higher dissipation typical for ultralinear designs like the 200S? In terms of bias dissipation, I'm not sure quite what you're asking there. When I get an ultralinear amp in, I bias it just the way I would any other amp, but it is certainly, if I watch the output level, I would certainly get more wattage out of the output with the ultralinear, but I bias it the same way, or even sometimes a little bit cooler. What is my preferred pot taper for my preferred pot taper for volume on a Strat. Of the stuff on the market today, because there were some really good options from Emerson and some other companies before COVID. Of the stuff on the market today, I like the Mojotone vintage taper, which is about a 25-30% taper. It's made for Mojotone by CTS, but it's not CTS branded directly. And the CTS 1 meg pot is crap. Get the Mojotone vintage taper. There's another company whose name escapes me right now that people talk about for taper. I've not tried it. It's a very expensive pot, and it seemed to have a lot of marketing in their material that I gave me a bad taste in my life in my mouth. I already know that the Mojotone vintage taper is quite good, and there's probably nothing wrong with if you're not using it a lot for swells, the Burns audio taper pot. The standard Burns audio taper pot is going to be a better quality than the standard CTS. But CTS doesn't just make the standard. They also have a low torque, which is very, very nice if you do a lot of that. And I like the tape, and that's closer to a 20% taper. But for my Strats, I've got the Mojotone vintage tapers, and I like them very much. We are going to take a second intermission, and we will be back in 7 minutes. Everyone, do what you need to do, and see you in a few. All right, we are back. Let's see. Where were we? Thanks, Robert D. Appreciate that. I'm getting some repeat questions. Again, to those of you who are new to our chat, please only ask them once. I do answer them in the order they come in. And I will, when it happens, when the same question appears more than one time here, it makes me think that I hit the wrong button. It scrolled back to where I was before, and it's just a little bit hard to navigate on this end. I don't know if you guys are aware of all the information I have coming me at once. Yeah, coffee prices are going up and will keep going up for some time. Which guitar am I playing the most lately? Josh Roberts asked. Well, lately I've been playing the Telecaster and the Eastman E8D the most. But it changes all the time. I put the Telecaster back up on the wall and got the Casino out so I can give it some love for a little bit of time. And, someone in the last stream was said, every stream he talked about the following 4 guitars. So, too many guitars there might understand. I'm not like one of those guys who's got like the wall of 30 guitars behind him. I've got 10. I do this for a living, guys. I do this for a living. Have I ever been to Denmark or another Scandinavian country? No, I've not. I want to at some point in summer. Might have to bring my own food, but I don't do herring. The farthest north I've ever been, I'm not sure if Oxford, England, or Vienna, Austria is farther north, but I've not been to Scandinavia or Germany yet. I think Oxford might be higher, farther north than Vienna. I'm not quite sure. Vienna's so far to the east. I don't have any opinion of Mojitone amp kits because I've not looked at them. I need to look and see what they're selling, but I just saw that when I went there to buy something, they said, hey, we've got amp kits. I'm like, well, everyone's got amp kits now. I would never build an amp with an amp kit. Might choose the chassis, chassis. I would go to Mojitone, get the chassis, cabinet, and iron because they make really good cabinets. They have really nice chassis for standard models, and they're the distributor for Haybor transformers. So that's one of the best games in town these days. But I have a suspicion that Stu Mac are the same thing, just rebranded. And I'm not sure about the Mojitones yet. Do I have any recommendations in the way of a tube-based power amp for modelers and preamp pedals aside from the Moore tube engine? Is this even a product? I would imagine there's tons of them, but I don't know that you would want one that's just a tube-based power amp because you'd probably want some kind of preamp for the thing because a tube-based power amp, the input just goes to a phase inverter to everything else. It's assuming that you have a preamp that's going to get up to a certain level already and that's going to have the right impedance to drive the power amp. Now, preamp pedals and modelers, sure, okay. I thought you were talking about just pedals. Okay. For some reason, I thought you were talking about just pedals straight into a power amp, which would sound terrible. But yeah, I'd be inclined to say check out the Fryette power station because it could certainly do that. I think it takes a regular line signal as well as all the speaker options it has. In which case you've got a little 100-watt power amp in there. But that's not something I've really kept up with. I don't know that you necessarily want or need a tube-based power amp for that situation, especially with modelers, because you'd be adding coloration beyond the control of the modeler. I think you'd want a very, very clean power amp with modelers, and probably very neutral sounding speakers. So maybe the better solution would be a good quality, if one of exists for a small price, powered monitor setup. I know people have the full frequency flat response systems now, but I think they're going to vary in quality. But I don't know that people really want the level of quality that you get from professional PA stuff, or at least could be willing to pay that price. Let's see. Sorry about the ads. They help me keep the roof on, and they help me get things like I just got. If you're here, Brad was saying that I had said in one of his videos that I was jealous of the new camera he got. He said I should stop whinging about it and just buy one. So, fucker, I did. The FX30 just got here right before the stream started, so I've got to play around with this, but this will be making its debut on the channel later this week. So goes back in, everything goes back into the channel, getting you guys better stuff. For instance, with these two cameras, next time I have a really good player come over, I can have the shot that you're used to. I can have a shot of just the hands, or I can have actually with those in the iPhone, I can have a shot of the hands, shot of the knob settings, the larger view of the whole player, you know, in addition to other things this will let me do. Yes, I can write off every guitar purchase as a business expense, Robert D. This camera is a business expense, and this microphone is a business expense, and my internet bill is a business expense, and this phone is a business expense, and the laptop is a business expense, and the guitars are business expenses. The guitars are signal generators. I mean, I can't continue to buy dozens more guitars and still claim that, but you know. Like if I go to get a 12-string, well, what if I have a client who has a 12-string? I need to know what it sounds like when they play a 12-string, right? Hey, PF, the 65 Deluxe Reverb we bought, real numbers matched, iron and chassis, has power caps changed, got to replace a power cord, any other things I might recommend despite functionality thoughts? I don't like it when it's only if you're talking about the filter caps, I don't like it if only the filter caps in the doghouse have been changed. All the old Mallory cathode bypass caps in the 65 would be the ones in the brown paper tubes. Those should all be changed out. All the electrolytics should be changed out. And in an amp of that age, the single diode in the bias I would replace with a 1N4007 just to be sure, because I have seen those diodes begin to fail. Write-off is not the same thing. I don't write off every purchase as business expense, but it's not free. I still have to buy the guitar. I have to buy the camera, but I can claim that as a business expense on taxes. So income going into that stuff it's complicated, and it's kind of vary by region, but it is a investment in the business and a cost of doing business kind of thing. Hey, Working Player 53 is considering putting active pickups in a Super Strat build. What are my experience with active pickups? And if I do, would I say they're worth the extra effort to install? I don't like them. But if you wanted to get a very specific kind of sound that was very common from about 84 to 1990, the EMG system, pardon me, the EMG system exists for a reason. I think perhaps that you could consider a Strat with EMG, SA, and the Floyd as kind of a unique variant of electric guitar. But you know, I think it's not a sound that I particularly love. It's certainly a sound that I became very familiar with, and it's in my record collection a lot, but I can still get those sounds with traditional pickups as well, for the most part. But there's a compression to EMGs that I don't care for. Sonny wants to know, should I get rid of my silver face amps? Is the tube industry going away? I'm 50 now and play occasionally. Well, I don't think the tubes are going away in the next 15, 20 years. Hope not. Should you get rid of your silver face amps? I don't know. If you only play occasionally, maybe you should. Maybe someone else would be better, make better use of them. If you only play occasionally, you don't want to deal with it, get a fractal setup, whatever makes you happy. Depending on your budget, it might just be, okay, I never use these things. They're too loud and heavy and require maintenance, and I only play occasionally. I'll just sell all those, and with the money, I'll buy a little Katana 50, and that does what I need it to do. I just kind of get a clean Fender sound out of it anyway, and it depends on the individual. I can't tell you what to do, Sonny. Hey, Martin, I appreciate you being here, especially given that it's relatively late there. Let's see. Did you get robot dog ads? I'm sorry. I have no thoughts on the Jornig or Yarnig pedals. I have no idea what they are, what they sound like. I try. In fact, I take an active role in finding out as little as possible about all the various pedals that come on the market every week. There's just so many of them. I imagine if it says Gristle King that it's endorsed by Greg Koch, in which case it may be fantastic, because he's a fantastic player, and I'd love to meet that man. He's both hilarious and it would make me feel small. I don't feel dainty very often, so I think I need a little Greg in my life. I think that's not an option. If Greg's in your life, it's a lot of Greg in your life. But if you ever see this Greg, you are always welcome here in any capacity. I just have to go back here so we both fit in the screen. The man is a giant, and he's tall too. Let's see. John Hogg recommends Stockholm. You might have that syndrome I heard about. No, it all looks beautiful. I'm just not a fan of brown bread and herring. So pretty much, that seems to be from like Amsterdam north. I'd be hungry a lot. Hey Jeff, no, Princeton without reverb or tremolo is easy. You can. If you can build an amp, that's the easiest possible amp to build, pretty much. That's basically a champ with a little more real estate. Well, good, and you can have all my herring. My lifetime supply of herring I bequeath to you. Hey, Brett M. On a 74 Marshall Super Bass. So you got it? Cool. The knobs are in really good condition, but could use a little bit of cleaning. Recommended process for those. Man, it's really tricky because the little silk screen that Marshall used on things, if it has a little black indicator line, even water can make that go away. Also, the silk screening on the front panel can go away just from water. I would probably say the safest thing to do would be to cover the front of each knob with a little bit of blue painter's tape, low tack. In fact, don't do it straight from the roll. Take it and go voopa on your jeans, then put it on the knob so you know it'll be low tack. It won't pull the finish off. And then get a little bowl of naphtha lighter fluid and a Q-tip, and do this on a kitchen table on some newspaper or whatever. Remember when we had newspapers? Anyway, something down, and just the Q-tip, just go down the side of each knob. Try to get as much of the grunge and stuff out as possible, because the naphtha won't hurt anything and it'll evaporate out. and you'll probably be able to get most of the grime and gunk off the sides of the knobs, and they'll look a lot nicer. And if you're very, very cautious, after you take the blue tape off, you can try to do that as well. Just avoid that little black indicator line. What do I need to consider when playing a bass through a guitar combo amp if the volume is kept at 3 or below? Are limitations based on amp's power, output power, or speaker wattage? The limitations are mostly the excursion of the voice coil and the excursion of the cones and the speakers. So if you have speakers that are not exactly healthy, you may find this out the hard way if you're playing bass through them. You would have eventually gotten to the same failure using guitar. It would have taken you longer to get there. But it's also a great way to break, if the speakers are healthy, playing bass at moderate volumes through them is a great way to make them open up faster and sound even better, be more responsive and dynamic. I would say that in general, the difference between a bass amp and a guitar amp is what mic is used and how it's put in the mix. Lots and lots of people used the AB165 bassbend for guitar, and lots of bassists also use that on record. If you listen to, go watch Let It Be, that's Paul into a 68 Silverface AB165. It might have been a late 67. And I think that he's using the same rig on Abbey Road. Previous to that, he'd done a lot of stuff using a 63 bassman. But at the same time, a lot of people have played bass into Fender guitar amps. Like the Showman was a very popular bass rig for people. Sometimes they play into a dual 15 rather than a 4x12 or whatever, or a single 15 versus a 2x12, because of people's concept of what bass should sound like. A 15 doesn't have as much high end. But the Olympic FX1 bass preamp, one of the first really popular preamps for bass, was the normal channel of a Fender Twin with no modifications except that they used 100 microfarad cathode bypass caps instead of 25, and which is pointless. 25 is already flat below the fundamental of a bass. So if the speakers are healthy and there's no problem whatsoever, you will have the fact that most speakers are flat down to 75 hertz, and below that they roll off. And the fundamental of a bass guitar is like 42 hertz. You'll still hear it because our ears will hear the octave overtone and supply the missing fundamental. It's a trick of acoustics. Anyway, unless your speakers are already failing, it won't hurt your amp. I went on too long on that, but it's an interesting thing to me. I don't like the Stratoblaster, the Olympic Stratoblaster myself. I think if you want the Super Strat active thing, either you go vintage and you go the EMGs, or going back to Greg Koch, maybe get the try the what are they called? The Fishman something or others. The modern Fishman doohickey fancy coil things. I'm not a big fan of active pickups, at least in guitar. In bass, I think they have more of a role. Man, come over and I'm going to show you some brown bread with stuff on top that's going to blow my mind. Well, the thing is, there's also such thing as good bread. And there's stuff besides fish and raw onion. Hey, Scott from Baltimore. A 65 reissue blows a fuse when I take it off standby when warm, or when I turn it on without standby when warm. Should I get slow blow fuses for it? Anything else I can check? Well, the amp should have a slow blow fuse anyway. Almost every fender should use the slow blow fuse so you don't get false failures. That said, I have noticed that in some fenders, they're wired wrong from the factory on the reissues. Sometimes they'll wire it so that, wait a second, no, I'm sorry, not on the reissue series, that's on the late 70s. Sorry, I got a lot of facts floating around here. Sometimes I grab the wrong one. Never mind that. I found some 70s circuits. I don't know whether there's factory mistakes that got through or whether the factory just forgot how to fender. They'd start putting the standby between the rectifier tube and the reservoir cap, which would be a recipe for your problem because you'd have a big surge. But the first thing I would do on your amp is make sure that it is a slow blow fuse, not a fast blow fuse. Second of all, don't use standby. It serves no role in that amp except to possibly blow a fuse. It's not needed. Just keep the standby switch up at all times. Just use the power switch. You won't hurt a thing. Standby was a mistake for that amp, and it was just done for marketing. So don't use it. I don't think you only eat herring in Scandinavia. I have seen. I watch a lot of travel videos. One we watched last night was a couple where the man's German and the wife is American, and for one day they were going to eat only the things that his German mother ate. It was depressing. And I've seen other things. I mean, there is a lot of herring and raw things with onion, and there is a lot of it out there. I also don't like brown bread. I don't. I don't think you only eat herring. You're not dolphins, but there are cuisines which appeal to me and cuisines which do not. And I think if the worst thing I have to say about Scandinavia is that the cuisine does not particularly appeal to me. I think then you'd be lumped in pretty much with England, and now we're full circle to whether that's part of Europe or not. Hey, thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. I do appreciate that. I don't mean to offend anyone in Scandinavia. I know that you guys only eat herring the way that we only eat cheeseburgers made on donuts. The stuff you see on YouTube can make things extreme. But I also, it is an educated making fun of, not an ignorant making fun of, but it is done with love. Let's see. Fluence, that's right, Lou. Yeah, the Fluence pickups. Those might be interesting to play around with for a Jacob guitar. How dare I, with love. Yeah, well, the Brits have got some things going on, but they are certainly spice adverse. Oddly, so is a lot of the food I had in Lisbon. Yeah, deep dish pizza, no thanks. Taco Bell, no thanks. I love pizza, but not deep dish is not even pizza. Hey, Richard gets so confused about when to use standby. I just use it as a convenience. What case should I definitely not use it? If you have an amp which has a rectifier a tube rectifier, there's no need to use standby at all, because the premise of standby is that you don't want to have the B plus higher than the ratings of the capacitors, and that will happen if the B plus is present before the output tubes are warmed up and drawing current. There are a couple other things like cathode followers that are issues. But anyway, the purpose of a standby switch is you have a solid state rectification. If I turn the amp on, the full B plus will be present pretty much instantly. It's a matter of milliseconds, but let's call it instantly, long before the power tubes are drawing any current, which will, once that current draws, the B plus drops down to its operating state. And so in this amp with solid state rectification, yeah, for the most part, use standby. If you have an amp with a tube rectifier, you keep the standby up, so the amp's never in standby. You power the amp on. The first thing that happens is the bias supply turns on, and it begins to warm up the rectifier tube. And at the moment the rectifier tube warms up enough that any DC is present on the DC side of the tube, that begins to trickle into the filter caps and fill those up. And so it begins to go like this. It's a slow rise. And it takes longer for the rectifier tube to warm up than it takes for the 6L6s or other output tubes to heat up. So by the time the rectifier tube is putting out its full DC potential on its secondary, the power tubes are already been drawing as much current as is available to them. So not only is the initial startup slow, but if you're to look at the output level, it's going up at a slow climb. So standby serves no role with that. And when you want to power it off, just power off the power switch. Very easy. Chicago deep dish is the best. The best what? Manhole cover? Tire? Wheel cap? Hubcap? It's not food. Seriously, Chicago deep dish pizza is disgusting. If a store, don't even talk about pineapple on pizza. Those are words that don't belong together, let alone actual objects. AC30C2 to standby or not, solid state rectification, use standby. Hey, Lucas Webb, he's from Brazil and is considering buying a handmade amp, not being tech savvy. What would I recommend he looks for when evaluating a handmade tube amp? That is really tricky to do in this context because I would need to have pictures to show you. The best thing I can say is to look through my videos where amps come in and I evaluate them. And you'll begin to see common things like, hey, this is why this is going wrong. This needs to be fixed. And whether it's an amp that used to be great, like I say a 65 Fender that I'm bringing back, or an amp from some other builder, I'm like, hey, this was really done well, except this pops when you do this. I think if you were to spend a week going through my videos, you'd come away with a much better sense of what the answer is than if I try to give you something in 5 minutes here when I don't have pictures or diagrams to show you. It's tricky. When you see what good builds look like, the bad builds stand out pretty fast. And I'm not saying it has to be my channel. You can look at Brad's channel, Brad's Guitar Garage. You can look at Colleen's channel. What is the name of her channel? Fabio Electric. When you see the people who go through these things again and again and again, we're always looking for the same issues, and we're finding the same issues. Yeah, Fazio Electric. Yeah, great channel. I'm not ever trying to put myself out like, hey, just look at my stuff. That's all you ever need to know. But I think my stuff holds up pretty well. You're the authority on Hawaiian pizza, Daniel James says. Well, I'm not looking for the authority. I'm looking for the culprit. Working Player 53 alleges that mayo and corn on pizza is a thing that exists. I don't hate you. Here's the thing. You put mayo and corn on something which could have been pizza, it's no longer pizza. It's something else. It's revolting, but it's not pizza. Sorry. There's Neapolitan pizza, and there's North American pizza, and then there's nothing else. I saw in that video with the couple I was talking about, with the man's from German and the woman, his wife is American. For breakfast one morning, he had what he called a tuna pizza, which was a vaguely pizza dough-ish base that looked kind of like a matzah. And then he had just tuna fish and some thinly sliced hard cheese on top. And he called it a tuna pizza. And first of all, revolting. Second of all, it's not a pizza at all. Yeah, and I'll let New York and Connecticut argue over whose North American pizza is best, and they're both right. But Mexican pizza is not pizza. Chicago tavern pizza is real pizza. Detroit pizza is real pizza. St. Louis's pizza is almost real pizza. If it had real cheese, it'd be real pizza. But, you know. Hey, sent to me. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Vising is cloned J1045 with KT66s, and V4 flows a few less milliamps than V5 with the same plate voltage. Well, don't worry about the number of milliamps per side. You need to know what the current draw per side compared to the winding of the the output transformer's primary is. So is one at 53%, the other one's at 56%? Totally fine. As long as they're within 10% of each other and you're not hearing any hum, it's fine. You're never going to get the same milliamp draw per tube. I think I worked on a Selmer a long time ago, Dean Sayers, but it's been so long that I don't recall, and that was before I was doing videos and photos. So it might have been a similar brand. There aren't a lot of Selmers in the States, and it was certainly not a Zodiac, because I would remember that, because I've always had my eye out looking to try a Selmer Zodiac because of Gilmore and McCartney. Araholics asks if he's the only person, or she the only person, who likes literally any food. Do I look like I don't like my food? I love food. I'm also a cook. And I like knowing where things come from and how cultures interact. And sometimes cultures interact amazingly. For instance, pizza. Because the tomatoes came from North America. And South America. Tomatoes were import into Italy. And eventually it became pizza and other wonderful things the Italians found uses for tomatoes for. Interesting. Did you guys know that a lot of people, when tomatoes were first discovered, when tomatoes were first discovered by Europeans, they did not want to try tomatoes. They thought they had to be poisonous because the botanists of the day said these are most closely related to nightshade. So they assumed that they would be poisonous. So tomatoes were avoided because they were related to nightshade, and people would avoid eating watermelon because they thought watermelon gave you yellow fever. Well, no, watermelon grows in swampy grounds where there's lots of mosquitoes that will give you yellow fever or malaria. So people thought watermelons were the cause of malaria or yellow fever, is where they grew. And people thought tomatoes would be poisonous. And some Italians said, I don't care, it looks delicious, I'm going to try it. And they got real good at it. But the same cannot be said once you add pineapple to the pizza, let alone, what was the thing someone said? I don't remember what it was now, sorry. Something horrible, some horrible thing to put on there. Dean, oh, you got a Zodiac Tremolo 50 Mark II? Well, Dean, if you're in the United States, you ever need service, I'd love to work on that for you. Just to know that. Yeah, pineapple and certainly was the downfall of Hawaii, pineapple and sugar cane. Hey, Ian, with the rise of Class D and the obvious benefits, what, if any, advantages does Class AB solid state have? Well, the main advantage is that Class D tends to die. It tends to be designed by people who were not taking into account non-optimal conditions, which actually occur all the time in the real world. And so when they fail in smoky ways. Now, it's usually not that expensive to replace them, but it is very common for them to fail. And it can be things like, okay, it's got these ferrite beads on the input. Well, they weren't rated for the current present when you get any kind of spike, and there it goes. So most Class D stuff is not robust and won't last, whereas most traditional push-pull solid-state designs were really well tested and were designed by people who are expecting there to be heat and current and vibrations and weight. I'm not saying that Class D has to suck. I'm not saying that Class D has to fail. I'm just saying that most Class D devices do tend to fail. They're just not built to last, and I think if you, as a musician, are upset by that, you should write to these companies and say, "Hey, I'd really love to buy your product, but can you stop using these poorly implemented ICE modules and give us something that will actually get me through a year's worth of gigging?" I'm aware of what Mexican pizza alleges to be, Andy66, but I don't want Mexican pizza any more than I want Italian tamales. I will say that I'd rather have Mexican pizza than French pizza, because when we were in Paris, no, it wasn't French pizza. They actually had very good pizza in Paris at some Italian place. They had what they call the French taco. That's what I'm thinking of. And I looked at one, and it was the saddest looking thing I ever saw. Oh. Look, Working Player 53 says, if I ever visit New York, I will get a slice of pepperoni pizza in their style. Well, I've got some good suggestions for you. First of all, to try the cheese first. To know a good New York pizza, the pizza is phenomenal, even if you just get the cheese. Anything above that is above and beyond. If I were taking you to New York right now, I think I'd probably take you to Bleecker Street Pizza. That's the $5 slice and a Coke, classic joint, right over by the Blue Note. If you don't like that, then it's not worth taking you someplace where you have to wait in line 2 hours for the even better stuff, because the Bleecker Street Pizza is just phenomenal. John's on Bleecker Street is the next level up. There's another place, John's, over on like 44th over by 7th, that I really like. And there's some places a little bit farther out from Manhattan to Central that are also great. But if you don't like, if you don't like Bleecker Street Pizza, you don't like pizza. Mayo corn. Ugh. Yeah, Jacob Elkins, Ben snaps are good. I just I wasn't terribly impressed, but it's a pretty thing. It's really well built. Hey, John Jankowski. When converting the basement output from 165 to 864, you notice I tie the V1 and V3 mixers to the same HV node. I don't change the node resistor, because there's so many different nodes in there. Because V1B and V3B are both being DC mixed, which will then go to the input after a coupling cap of V2B, or not V2B, that is the question. Anyway, because they're doing a DC mixer, and because V1 in the stock setup, V1B and V3B are on different nodes, And because they're doing a DC mixer, that undoes the decoupling. That puts those nodes together in a very noisy way. And so by doing it the way I'm making that one change, just moving where that resistor is connected, I usually move the resistor, or just lift one wire and then bridge a wire over. I'm mixing them together from the same node, so all the decoupling stays present, and it really lowers the noise floor. And there's no real appreciable change to the sound of the amp other than the noise level goes down, which is nice. And it's also actually not just the noise level goes down. It has a more pleasant behavior when you're getting the overdrive engaged, because the overdrive is well filtered for the first time, because they haven't undone the filter nodes the way they do in the stock form. It's a weird choice they made. Well, if this is making you hungry, my job is well done. Well, I can't say that all Class D stuff is prone to death, and I would not say avoid all Class D power amps. I would say do some research, contact and ask some questions about it. Like, I've heard really good things about the Aguilar bass amps, the 500 volts and all that. Those things, the tone hammers, they sound really good. They are very lightweight, very small. People love them. I would want to find out more about what the failure rate's like, what the repair rate's like. Might be really looking into, but the stuff out there that's just using the generic ICE modules, and that includes the Fender Tone Masters, those fail repeatedly again and again and again. I don't know if Aguilar is using that, or if Aguilar is using some other company's power module, or whether Aguilar is using a higher end offering that company makes, and other companies are using a cheap one. I've not looked into it too much because I'm not in the market to buy them. I'm just saying that I see again and again the Class D stuff that is on the market, by and large, is put on the market to be the cheapest possible option, because they just need to keep the price down so they can sell a whole bunch of them. But it's not an indictment of Class D. That's an indictment of choosing Class D solely because it can be really cheap. When it's chosen to be cheap, it tends to be poor quality. New Haven, Connecticut, yeah, it's got some serious pizza. And that's why I said they can argue in New York over who's got the best. Though I don't want the clam, but they are famous for the white clam pizza in New Haven. But they also have pizza flavors. See, I don't just make fun of the Scandinavians. I don't like fish or clams. I like lobster and crab and shrimp, but I don't much care for clams. When cascading the preamp channels of a silver-phase bass pan, what precautions do I take to avoid exceeding the phase inverter's maximum input voltage swing? I don't. Turn up till, if it sounds bad, once you turn up a certain amount, turn it down until it doesn't sound bad anymore. It won't hurt anything. It won't sound, if it sounds bad, don't do that. Doc. But you won't hurt a damn thing. Let's see. Jacob Elcom says, good idea. Harmonic tremolo by separating the highs and lows by using one bulb and two optical resistors with it, one for each path. One of the various series resistance and the other various resistance to ground. I'm not sure why you want to vary the series resistance, the other various series resistance to ground. I would split the path by using a modern optocoupler, one which turns on when light is present, one which so you'd have a flip-flop. I'm not sure that entire path would work, because it'd be easy to split a circuit based on what's the best way to put this? Usually when you do harmonic tremolo, you're introducing some kind of phase shift. And I'm not sure how you're going to get the phase shift with what you're talking about. You get differences in timing, potentially, or difference in level, but I don't think you would do any good at separating the highs and lows. There are other ways to do that. I think that's a very complicated way to achieve not what you're after. I could be misreading your question, your suggestion, though. I'm not trying to shit on it. Daniel James remembers his first Pepe's white clam slice. I would certainly try it when I'm there. I would try it, but when I want pizza, I'm not thinking, if only I had some white clam. But New Haven is right there on the water. I have worked on Hughes Kettners. I hope never to work on a Hughes Kettner again. They are a company which is horrible to their owners. I think they are not a good sounding or well-built amplifier. I think that their ground connections and their chassis should be illegal and certainly not ready for the real world. And to build an amp with a giant clear plastic panel with a specialty light that's built so that you have to take the whole thing out to pull the chassis, and the whole thing likes to break if someone, the owner, pulls the chassis without knowing all the tricks to it, and then charging them $300+ after a 6-month delay for the replacement light. I don't like it. Five Watt Works. Is that you, Keith? Did you change Works to World to Works? On a silver-faced basement, why does adding a presence control require adjusting the negative feedback resistor? Well, okay. Can I explain how the presence circuit works relative to the feedback loop impedance? Well, the presence is derived from the negative feedback. So let's see the best way to say this. All right. Let me take you off the screen because I'm still going to answer your question. Hey, Keith. All right, so here's your negative feedback. Some of this is going to be mixed into your phase inverter, and it's going to lower the gain of the phase inverter. And if you're just feeding the entire negative feedback into the phase inverter, it's going to lower the gain here at the phase inverter equally in all frequencies. But if I were to change the value so that I'm going to roll off some highs from the negative feedback coming in, and all the lows are going to go in, then when I have the signal now, which is the negative feedback, but more lows than highs because the highs were dumped off the ground, it's kind of inverse. It's saying, hey, everything this has in common with this, turn down. Everything that's different, stay up. So this negative feedback has lows but doesn't have highs because I dumped them to ground, and so it gets mixed in. And what it does is it lowers the gain of the lows and makes the amp sound brighter because it's not turning the gain down on the highs and the output. And so presence is a way of working with the negative feedback. Now, it's also a voltage divider. So you don't have to adjust the negative feedback resistor. You have to understand that the negative feedback resistor in any amp works in conjunction with whatever resistor is between the tail and ground, or between the cathode and ground. So if an amp which doesn't have negative feedback, you might have, let's take a AC30, the 1.2K cathode resistor, and then a 47K cathode resistor going to ground. In an amp which does have negative feedback but does not have a presence, say a Fender Twin, you would have an 820 ohm resistor, your negative feedback resistor. You'd have a 470 ohm cathode and a 22K a tail resistor, and then 100 ohms to ground, and that 820 ohms joins there where the 22K joins to the 100 ohm, and that goes to ground there. So you have a voltage divider of the negative feedback, 820 ohms and 100 ohms. So 82 to 1, 82 to 10, so 8.2 to 1 ratio there. If you were to do that, so you had a presence circuit, well, in order to get the presence to work, you'd have to use a pot to replace the 100 ohm. Well, there isn't a pot that's readily available that replaces the 100 ohm. You need a pot which is available. So let's try a 20K, a 25K. Well, all right, then I've got a 25K resistor taking the place of, well, let's do it easier. I'm winging all this. So let's do the Marshall thing. We'll take a 5K resistor. That's the smallest, 5K pot. The 5K pot is the smallest thing we can easily buy. So instead of having 100 ohm, it's 5K. Well, all right, in order to maintain the same voltage divider, instead of being 820 ohms and 100 ohms, you may be 47K and 5K. So you're still having a voltage divider there. And that pot lets you put the cap, which dumps the highs off that. So the highs aren't being mixed back in, and you get a brighter sound. Or as you turn the presence down so the highs are not rolled off in the negative feedback, then the entire amp is turned down, which makes the amp sound darker. That's probably like the sloppiest way to explain it, but I try. Hey, Fletch is 40. I'm glad to keep you away from that, the H and K, because they're not good. And I'm a big Lifeson fan, but I don't like that endorsement. Would I ever use the unused triode in AB165 Basement 50? Well, Ken Fisher did, but I've always found that the amp has plenty of gain, and I've tried doing that as I played around with that, paralleling that, and didn't get any benefit from it. The one benefit you can get is if you tie those 3 unused pins to ground, so the tube is a little bit happier. What would I consider a fair price for a 65 Fender SB? I don't know what an SB is, but I don't keep up with the value of the market. I don't play that game. I'm not a collector. I'm not a dealer. Ask a dealer; they'll tell you. I know what the value of the amp design is, and I know what it would cost to build a new one that would sound the same way. So I have. I cannot tell you more than that. Sorry, this whole day I felt like I've been underwater, and I just feel really disconnected from everything, which is, I'm sorry, I don't think this is the best stream I've ever done for you guys, but it is reaching the end of the stream. As Keith joins us, it is time to begin to wrap this process up, because my wife is downtown and needs to be picked up in 30 minutes. So, what would I consider a fair price for recently serviced? Again, Angelo, I cannot tell you that. I don't know the answer for fair prices. I would contact. I don't know where you're at, but you might want to contact Chicago Music Exchange and/or some of the places in Nashville and see what they consider, because those guys kind of set the prices on the market. Chicago Music Exchange and Carter Vintage are kind of like the market leaders on vintage amps. Let's see what they're saying. What is the best pizza in Memphis? Keith asks. I'm not sure that there is anymore. We used to have a place on Union called Little Italy, and it was really, really good. And it was bought by someone else. And they bought the recipe, but they did not buy the vendors. And so their sausage supplier changed, and their sauce got sweet and became garbage. There's a couple of places that promote themselves as being, hey, we do it right, and there's so much sugar. Either the sauces are too sweet or the crusts are too bubbly. It's not really, as of the time of me saying this, I'm unaware of any pizza in Memphis really worth eating. which makes me sad because I love pizza. But I haven't felt like making, going to the effort of making my own. But I think we're going to wrap this up, everyone. It's your stock closing question. Well, actually, before I let you guys go, there was a pizza that people raved about online. Table 87, a frozen pizza that's supposed to be phenomenal. It's supposed to be just like a really good Neapolitan thing. I bought one. It tasted like cardboard with some Chef Boyardee sauce poured on it. It was so bad. Actually, I'll tell you there, Mark Spurgeon's got it. The best pizza I've found in Memphis is the pizza in the food court at Costco. And much as that pains me to say that, and I've bought that pizza at Costco, and it does not taste as good when you make it at home in the oven. But yeah, if I were really hankering for pizza, I'd probably go to Costco. That's the best we got here. And that's not really saying that much. Dang it. All right. Thank you all for joining me. And again, newer and better looking things are coming in the future. Probably not necessarily me, but the apps and such. See ya.